I'm Mary Lou Wilton with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also out of the city limits.
Good morning, I'm Justine Morris, the Membership Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm outside the city limits.
Kimberly Charles, CEO of the Chamber. I'm in Ward 1, and I will be trying to keep you guys on time today.
Good big ones, that's good.
And we have a couple more that came in to you ready.
Clayton Floyd, Ward 2.
Mr. Boshi?
I'm Bob Oshie. I'm with Smurf and Stone. I'm about at the city limits.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to let each of you talk for 3 minutes. I'll sort of moderate this. Kim's got some signs back there. When the red one goes up, you need to be quiet. We're just going to actually time you. And in terms of the other questions that may be asked, we'll give you about a minute or a minute and a half and let you go. If it gets too long, we may hold up some signs. So let's start with you, Tracy.
Well, thank you. Good morning, and I appreciate that you let a Ward 3 candidate come here on the day when you're really with Wards 4, 5, and 6. I am Tracy O'Reilly, running for City Council in Ward 3. I've lived 22 years in Missoula, 22 years in Ward 3, and 22 years in my home. I raised my daughter here in town. She went to Willard Elementary, Roosevelt Middle School, both now closed, Hellgate High School, and she's at the University of Montana now. I'm self-employed. I'm the on-site maintenance person, manager, landscapist for a couple of rentals in my 93-year-old home. I currently sit on the city's design review board. I'm a member of the board of Race to the Sky, which is the sponsor of the annual 350-mile sled dog race. And in February, we always like volunteers, by the way, and it's a lot of fun. I have been involved with the McCormick Neighborhood Association for at least 10 years. It's a grassroots organization that formed without any tax money before neighborhood councils. And its initial reason for existence was to pick up stuff in the alleys that people thought was unsightly. In the last couple of years, I sat on the City University jointly sponsored Housing and Livability Issues Working Group Task Force. The work of that group was cited by the regents in their decision last summer to build 216 new 2-bedroom housing units. That project brings $18.9 million into the community. It's an injection of capital into this economy and a worthy attempt to assist with the housing crunch we're facing here now. I sat this year on the McCormick Park Master Site Plan Working Group, which has presented its proposals to the City Council. I wrote 2 years ago a Missoula Neighborhood Project Funds grant, which was fully funded at $3,000 to assist in the research and ultimate nomination of the McCormick Historic Neighborhood to the state and the national level so we can get our historic designation, and that money augmented money from the State Historic Preservation Office. I'm a strong advocate of neighborhoods for respecting the historic character and flavor of our neighborhoods, and I support historic preservation. I've long appreciated and supported Missoula's small businesses, the creative, entrepreneurial spirit they present to this community. The Missoula Redevelopment Agency has done much to foster the variety of local businesses which we enjoy and which keep their profits in this town. I'm running for City Council hoping to effectively represent neighborhoods and to offer thoughtfulness and reason to city dialogue. Thank you. Jerry?
Good, thank you. I'm Jerry Ballas. I'm currently the representative of Ward 4 in my last of my 4-year terms. I'm not going to go into too much of my history because I think most of you know me. However, I do want to emphasize I have been a lifelong resident, 3rd generation. I've been in business and trying to run my own business for over 30 years, so I know what it's like to sign checks on both sides of a check. I know what it's like to manage employees. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in this community. The last 5 years, we've seen a lot of ups. I think hope we haven't totally forgot what it's like to be down because we never know when that trend is coming around, but you always have to be prepared for that. I'm going to run on the record and the things that I've supported. And I've been a strong supporter of business. Without business, we wouldn't have Missoula. Missoula was founded by a person that wanted to establish a trading post to do business in Missoula, and so we have our grassroots there. I'm a strong believer that our base support should be to all businesses, but also to our primary business. I was taught in school that our primary businesses such as agricultural, lumber, smoothed surface stone, paper mills and that type of thing actually supply the base economy that everybody else can make a business from. So those base businesses support the service industries that we have. So I've been a strong supporter of those basic industries. And right now, the university and the medical profession is a key element in that. And it's one of the reasons why I strongly support the Safeway St. Pat's proposal, because I see it as an opportunity to support and help a business that is a very key employer with some of the highest paying jobs in Missoula to remain competitive and remain in Missoula. I'm not looking for 5 years down the road, I'm looking for 10, 15, 20, or even 50 years down the road. And we need to support those people. We need to support Smurfit Stone. We need to support the university. I've been out working with the university ever since I started architecture out there, and one of my key projects has been the university stadium. People were around when we started that, know the controversy of, well, should we even build here? What's it going to do? Well, we started out with 5,000 people at the old Dorm Blazer, where you're lucky to get somebody to come. The first year we opened at Washington Grizzly Stadium, we had 12,000 people there. 5 years later, that was increased to 19,000. Now we're up to 23,000. And that brings a lot of people into this neighborhood. And we wouldn't have that facility there if there weren't some strong people that believed in helping Missoula grow. So I'm here to help business and support business, as well as my neighborhood.
Thank you, Jerry. Alan?
Well, good morning, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's a little early in the morning, but well, I'm Alan Alt, running for City Council, Ward 4. And why am I running? Because along with the other City Council members, I can make a difference. I want to be a voice of the people. I've got an extensive background as a business manager, strong background in the field of cost engineering. I've been a member of the American Association of Cost Engineers for over 25 years. My experiences in the construction field, project management, contracting, personnel administration, and volunteer activities, I feel, have prepared me well. This is the background that I bring to the city of Missoula. I've got no hidden agenda, no external pressures. I don't own a business. I have no business interests in the city or the county of Missoula. I'm retired, and this is something that I want to do. And I can devote full time to it. I want a robust, historic downtown. I'm very pro small business. If anybody that I've talked to, you can ask people that I've talked to, and this is something that I've said all along. I want Missoula with a sound, self-sufficient economy, attracting and encouraging small business. I want Missoula that's a garden city with trees, bike paths, a variety of activities for our citizens to do. And I don't want Missoula to be just another stop along the interstate. Thank you.
Scott?
I'm Scott Morgan. I have represented Ward 5 for the past 8 years, or coming up on 8 years now. The background that I bring to that, I started off as an English professor with Shakespeare as a specialty. Since then, various endeavors that I've been involved in are school board in Heron, Montana, advising a young friend on his bank application for a loan for his salmon fishing boat in Alaska, writing personnel management, personnel manuals, job descriptions, job evaluation forms for the school and for some businesses I've incorporated. quite a number of small nonprofits, which involved writing bylaws and articles of incorporation, charters, that sort of thing. I, as a contractor, wrote the consultant contractor, wrote the strategic plan for the Los Angeles County Health Department, which is the largest health department in the United States. In '86, I came to Missoula. I came to Montana in '74, and went to the University of Montana and took a degree in speech communication, which doesn't describe very well what I was studying, which was organizational development, organizational communication, intercultural communication, and dispute management. I've really enjoyed my 8 years on council. The issues are constantly challenging, and they're usually new and interesting. There's something new happening all the time. I think I bring attitudes and skills that make me useful there, and I regard it as an excellent field for public service that I enjoy.
Thank you, Scott.
I'm Bob Lovegrove. Glad to see all of you here. I wish there were more. Unfortunately, part of Missoula's problem stems from the fact that there aren't enough people involved in the political process. I've served on this committee off and on for many years, and I've been a chamber member for many years as well. I came to Missoula as soon as my mother would let go, and I went to the university starting in 1962 and graduated in '66 with a degree in forestry. I left for 6 years and got another degree in forestry and one in economics, and taught at the university level for a couple of years before returning to join the faculty at the forestry school and work on contract, the U.S. Forest Service. I was eventually converted to federal employment and worked for the Forest Service until 1978, when I left and went into the real estate business with Lambros Real Estate. I focused on commercial and investment properties there, and eventually started my own firm so that I could incorporate a property management company with my activities, because I had so many investment property clients. I got frustrated in the development process of 2 fourplexes in 1985. And didn't like the candidates for mayor, so I threw my hat in the ring at the last minute and was elected by 0.8% of the vote. The next year, I-105 was passed, and we went through some very serious challenges at City Hall. The city was just about broke at the time I took over, and the state of the economy was very different than it is now. But we managed to maintain the city's credit rating and turn things around and build the cash balance back up by about 8 or 10 times from what it was when I first took office. I've owned a number of businesses through investments. Co-owner of Brownies Plus Motel and Restaurant, was involved in the redevelopment of that property. I developed 4 fourplexes and 6 duplexes here in town. I built 2 homes. I owned a laundromat for a while. And after I was mayor, I served Purity Systems as the CEO for a year, developing a national market for a water filter that they're now finally just bringing online. And after that, we bought a hardware store in Stevensville, and we moved down there in 1992 and lived there for 7 years. I sold the store in 1999 and moved back here, and this is what I do now. I tell you about my business ownership to let you know that I, like Jerry, have signed both sides of the paycheck, managed employees, and have dealt with on a day-to-day basis the challenges that many of you face as business owners and operators. And I'm running for city council because I think Scott Morgan needs to run challenge this time rather than unchallenged as he did last time.
Randy?
Hi, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to let people in Missoula know who I am. My name is Rennie Malach. I lived in Missoula since 1966, when I was hired by, at that time, Waldorf Paper Products to come here to, on the startup of one of the new paper machines at that time, #2 paper machine. I worked for 10 years as an operator after we got the machine started, before I was promoted in 1976 to a salaried position of shift supervisor. During the time I was on hourly and operator, I served in the union as secretary and president, and was on 3 of the negotiating committees that negotiated contracts with the company at that time. As I said, in 1976, I was promoted to a salaried position as a shift supervisor. In the last 12 years that I worked there before I retired a year and a half ago, I worked as a department coordinator for safety, personnel, scheduling, and quality. And the quality part was visiting customers that had complaints of our products and trying to solve the problems that they were having with our product. At that time, it gave me a chance to meet a lot of different people outside of our own company, and also in my job in the last 12 years, it gave me a chance to work with a lot of people and people problems and solving them problems with the people for a better operation of our department. I've also been involved in Little League Baseball in Missoula since 1972, and helped spearhead fundraising and the construction of Little League, Westside Little League Complex, which is on Spurgeon Road, which has been an ongoing thing, I thought, for 10 years, and I am still at it. And enjoy working with the people in that way, and also with the kids, and developing a place for them to have a good, safe program. I believe a lot in the same thing about the housing and that in Missoula. I believe that I'm not against development, but I believe in creating residential areas that are safe and quality of life for the people in Missoula, and what the people in Missoula and the neighborhoods want in their neighborhood. Not something that is different than what they got when they bought their house or built the house where they are now. I believe in working with the people. I want to be a voice for the majority of the people in my neighborhood in Ward 6. I hope that I can get the majority of the people, the silent majority, to get active. It's so many times we've got, as it's been said, the tail wagging the dog, rather than the majority, the silent majority, getting active and letting the people in government know what they want. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to let you know who I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Rennie. Ed?
I am Ed Childers. Once again, how many people in the audience are from Ward 6? Clayton. Clayton and the 2 of us, and I'm kind of concerned by that for some reason. I don't know why. You'd think there'd be at least some business people besides Clayton. Tell you about myself. I'm always concerned about talking about myself, because I'm either going to be really brief or never know when to stop. I was born in 1947 in Washington, D.C. My dad was in the Army, so I was an Army brat. He was what they call a lifer. He was in the Army for 20 years. So the first 16 years of my life, we moved from place to place, cycling back into Missoula periodically. I was here through the 4th grade, into 7th grade, and I graduated from high school here. I've seen Missoula change a lot. I've never particularly liked that, but I never thought that I had a lot to do about that, and I still don't. Things do change, and if the economy stops growing, it's likely to stagnate or shrink. And we don't want to be like Butte. It just doesn't work. I worked at the city now, at City Hall, for 24 years. 20 years in the treasurer's office, 12 of those years as the city treasurer. I learned to do SID billing, special assessments, learned to license businesses, yours, not the realtors, not the banks, not the lawyers. There are several kinds of businesses that have opted out of that, but I've had pretty good relations most of the time with businesses. Marky's smiling back there, he knows. I also fortunate enough to be at the dawn of the city of Missoula's computer age, and I got to learn to program in COBOL. And I programmed a nice business licensing program. My kids went to school here, graduated here. My son, incidentally, Jerry was talking about the capacity of the Washington Grizzlies Stadium. My son just started grad school at University of Michigan, 110,000 people in that stadium, go Wolverines. On the city council, I'm out of time here, but I've been in all of the committees. I've chaired A&F, I've chaired a subcommittee called zoning, and I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Went
Well
the
done.
wrong way on out.
Thank you for all of your comments. Great job. Now we're going to open it up to our audience for any questions that you have of the candidates. So, any first takers? Ken?
In a minute or a minute and a half, tell us, each of you tell us how you're different from your person running against you.
Ed, let's start on your end.
The biggest difference probably is that I've been into this thing for a considerable length of time, and I am familiar with the ins and outs of what's going on. It's not that I don't have more to learn. I'm learning more about this zoning and planning and subdividing issue every Tuesday at 1 o'clock, along with a number of other people. But I think that's probably the biggest difference, other than philosophical differences, which we haven't sat down and hammered out.
As far as my differences with Ed, I really don't know that much about Ed. Like you said, we haven't sat down. What I do know is some of the issues and that have come up at the city council in our city. Differences are is that what I'm told and what I hear and what I watch, that I feel that I'm a person of integrity, and the way I talk is the way I vote.
I'm sure there are more differences between Scott and I than either of us know. He hasn't had much of an opportunity to observe me, and I've had a limited opportunity to observe him. But Scott's approach to things is very different from mine, from the standpoint that he is very strongly an advocate of the growth management program that we're doing, planned neighborhood clusters and density bonuses, and I have serious reservations about them as they're being implemented. And I think the rest of the community is starting to express similar reservations. Scott has no problem with the level of funding that's going on at City Hall and raising your taxes by 5% this year, and had the mayor had his way, it would have been 9%. I ran on no tax increases when I was mayor, and I certainly think that that's something to strive for. Whether or not it can be accomplished, I don't know. But at any rate, the thing that really tipped me over was the difference between the way I feel about our flag and the way Scott does.
I've been interested to see how in significant regards Bob and I approach city business similarly. I've been surprised at that as we go from a couple of little forums together, and I think it comes in some regard from both of us being experienced in city government and having developed an understanding of what the limitations of the city as a government are, what's really possible and what's not possible. With regard to growth management, I am a strong advocate of growth management. Bob is quite right. I would like to say also that I have some reservations about how it's being implemented, and I'm serving regularly on the subcommittee that's working to revise the density bonuses and the planned neighborhood clusters that Bob mentioned, and I see good hopes for making some good improvements in these. With regard to taxes, I just don't see any way that we can even maintain our current level of service without gradually increasing our income. Inflation does go on. You probably noticed that in business. I aim to keep our increases in line as nearly as I can understand it with the inflation that we experience in doing our job. And then building better services must come out of efficiencies and better ways of doing business. King has called time on that.
Thank you. Alan?
Fundamentally, I don't believe there's a lot of differences between Jerry and I. Jerry's at a disadvantage because he doesn't know that much about me. For the most part, like I said, I think we agree on a lot of the issues. There's some that we do disagree on. However, I believe it's time for a change. And like I said earlier, I can devote all my time to the issues facing City Council and facing the city.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is, one, I've got one opponent that didn't even show up today, but I guess he could come to the Democratic forum, but he doesn't choose to respond to the Chamber forum, so it makes you wonder where he's at in the business community. As far as Alan, you know, our biggest difference is time in Missoula. I don't know how you can understand Missoula without living it and having been here through all the ups and downs of it. I don't know how you can understand the business unless you've actually been involved in the business and seen that, and I've done that for a long time. There's differences and changes. I've been supporting the Safeway St. Pat's program because I know it's good for the growth of Missoula, and Alan just keeps coming up, well, I can find a better way to put that old building together. So I think there are some differences between us, and the main one is time in Missoula, understanding Missoula, all of the intricacies of it, things like the living wage issue. Alan wasn't even around when we discussed the living wage issue and the impacts that would have had on Missoula and businesses. So time in Missoula and experience in Missoula business, you don't know what it's like until you've been through the challenges.
Tracy?
Thanks. Well, I think probably the biggest difference between the other candidate in Ward 3 and myself is our position on infill. And, well, I think we don't have control of the exponential growth in population worldwide that I think is fueling growth in population to any place that's halfway nice around this country and around the world. I don't think we can control population growth. I don't think we're going to stop sprawl in this valley by infilling this community till it doesn't look like the town we love. And I think that's probably, our views on that infill are probably what distinguish us. I believe that we do need infill in the community, but I think we should be realistic that wrecking our neighborhoods is not going to avoid sprawl, and I would like to see us redefine infill, redirect it to appropriate larger sites in the community, perhaps to redevelop older but in-town, outdated, no longer used industrial and commercial sites along the tracks, the areas between Mount and South, from Rose Park to Malfunction Junction, the MRA, URD3 area. The other is our knowledge of city government. I've been around Missoula a long time and know a lot of the players. And my name is O'Reilly.
Thank you. Who's in the back corner? Oh, Steve, I'm sorry. Steve Earle?
This is kind of a two-part question. I'd like you to, each candidate to name what they consider to be the three most important committees in regard to the city council. And then if you were to donate $1 to the city budget, how would you divide it up between those three committees?
Let's start in the middle.
In 1 minute, right?
Well, you might want to bump it up to 2 minutes.
Okay. Start in the middle. Scott, I'm going to pick on you first, I think.
Okay. The three most important are probably PAZ, Plat Annexation and Zoning, which deals with land use, A&F, Administration and Finance, which deals with the inner workings of the city and the financing of the city. And the third one would be a harder choice. Probably Public Works, because its activities so pervade everybody's life in the city. If I had a dollar, administration and finance doesn't really need it. All they do is sit there and think.
We're not gonna give you the dollar.
This is an outside dollar. I would split it between OPG, 2/3, and 1/3 for Public Works. Public Works really has no money for doing local streets. I just really don't know what's going to happen in the long run for our local streets. Office of Planning and Grants is the institution that really tries to keep us on top of the kind of growth and change that is going on, and frankly simply cannot keep up with the demand for increased understanding and increased and modified regulations that will cause things to go well for the community.
Thank you. Bob?
I agree with Scott on the committees. In order, I put administration and finance, PAC, and Public Works, and I would give my dollar to Public Works to fix the streets.
Thank you. Rennie?
I would have to probably agree again with the two previous people, and because, like I say, I'm still learning, I'm new to this, I'm not sure I know all the committees that are involved in the city council yet, and learning that every day. But as far as number one committee, I would say the planning and zoning needs to get a lot of work done. With Missoula growing the way it is, and to get the zoning rules and ordinances and that in order to match what the people in the city and the neighborhoods want. The finance committee, of course, you're going to have money to do all this stuff without raising taxes. And the public works committee, again, with this Missoula growing like it is, it has to keep up with the streets and the infrastructure so that it can handle what's all going on in Missoula right now. And as far as my dollar, I really don't know how I would divide it up right now.
Okay, Rennie, thank you. Ed?
I don't think you can allocate money by committee. I don't think that's gonna work. But if you were, keep in mind that the general fund budget of the city of Missoula is primarily for employees, and 2/3 of the employees are police and fire. And police and fire comes from the Public Safety and Health Committee. So I imagine you'd want to give 2/3 of your dollar to that committee if you're really going to do anything. Conservation does all of our park stuff and open space stuff, and the aquatics facility, if that happens, will be through conservation. And these are pretty big buck items, $5 or $8 million at a time, so conservation is important. A&F is kind of a funnel through which money flows. The budget committee of the whole, of course, does the money allocation, but A&F does the day-to-day budgetary considerations. PAZ has a huge responsibility for our day-to-day lives. They have decisions made there affect the way land is used and the way the land next door to you gets used. So this is how I approach the city council, waffle on everything.
Yeah.
Tracy?
Well, I don't know how to follow that in. I guess I agree that in the time of rapid growth in this valley that we're facing, PAZ is really important, and the decisions coming out of there regarding what we do and don't do that affects the changes in the community land use planning. I think PAZ is very important. And I guess I have to throw it up in the air about the next one, whether these streets that people complain, when you talk to people in the community, that's one of the things you hear a lot, is that they're sick of the pothole out in front. So Public Works, but we've got a lot of proposals for how to manage our parks. So conservation is important, and the proposals for the McCormick Park improvements and other proposals. People talk about the riverfront trails expansion and the continued improvement of that in our downtown. But the one that I guess I'd give all my money to would be public safety and health, because I think we really need to start enforcing the existing ordinances in this community about, in relation to issues that are related to livability, the behavior ordinances that are part of the, I guess it's all complaint driven, and there's not enough money to respond to the complaints about behavior in neighborhoods that is part of the fuel behind the impetus that fueled the occupancy standard discussion a few years ago. So better enforcement of behavior, including landlord as well as tenant, and we can't leave owners out too. So I'll stop. That's public safety and health getting my dollar.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jeremy?
While PAZ and A&F are important committees, and growth management is probably one of the major discussion items going in town, to me they're both administrative policy setting committees. My dollars would get public health and safety. If we didn't have fire and police, we wouldn't have a community. Public works, again, water and sewer, key infrastructures. If we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have growth in the facilities to support things. Conservation is primary because I sit on the chair of it, and I think it's pretty important. But when I think of all of the recreation and the parks and the open space and the activities that we've have to take on responsibility for, conservation is third on my list, and I would allocate the dollars 60, 20, and 10.
Thank you. And Alan?
Well, I would say A&F is one of the most important, and the PAZ, because that deals with a lot of the issues that we have right now. But the one that I didn't hear is the committee of the whole. That's where I'd give my dollar, because that affects every issue in the city. And that's it.
Thank you. Tim Coughlin?
First of all, I'd like to just say thank you to all of you for running. I've attended enough of the council meetings to really question why anybody would want to be part of that. I have a hypothetical question. I think you might be able to answer it with just a simple yes or no. We have a Roseburg Forest Products that is a new member of our community. And as such, they might do an expansion. So let's assume for a moment that they proposed an expansion that would cost $5 million and would add 25 jobs to the community, and that the proposal met all state, federal, and city county regulations. Would you or would you not support the expansion?
Alan, I'm going to start with you this time.
Absolutely. I definitely would support that expansion.
Jerry?
Well, yes, I would definitely support it, but I think the hidden question here, how would you support it? I'm not totally sure that I would necessarily give it dollars or something from the city as far as grants, but we've got people that do that in Missoula Economic Development. I would certainly encourage it to go to an organization like that. And on the city council, I would support the MEDC that supports a lot of businesses. In fact, last year I was one of the few that encouraged the city to give a little bit more money to MEDC so they can do their job to help other people do their jobs. I'd also enforce management. I'd like to see the chamber maybe support a resolution for the to support the healthy forest, because the one way to support a group like this is to support their basic economy or their basic resource. And from just the title of it, it sounds like it's a forest products that needs some resources.
Thank you, Jerry. Tracy?
I think I'd have to ask you a few more questions first about exactly the nature of the Roseburg paper. Is it competing with our mill here, where we already have an employer that I guess I believe we need to support our existing employers too when we allow new employment to come in. I mean, generally, I think we need to support employment coming into this community that adequately pays people so that they can approach something like affordable housing or having the money to buy, to pay for lived life. So I would support it with adequate wages and like Jerry's comment about resource support. But I would analyze new businesses in the light of the kind of competition they would be giving existing local businesses here.
Ed?
Well, to start with, it satisfies all of the government requirements. But I really don't know what it does. And I'm thinking back to Ross Electric, which I believe satisfied all of the government requirements, but burned transformers which contain PCBs and dioxins and would have put stuff into our air and ground. So, does the word waffle sound familiar? You need to know more. Basically, if it meets all the requirements, yes, I would support it. As far as additional incentives, tax incentive support and stuff, that's probably not part of your question, so I won't even, I hope, so I won't go into that.
Thanks. Ready?
Of course I support it. We're talking about providing affordable housing in Missoula, and what a better way to provide affordable housing, but to provide jobs that pay higher wages that the people can afford the housing. So sure, I support it, in knowing the company as it is now, operating, meeting the requirements of the state, federal, and city. Why wouldn't?
Bob?
I most certainly would. I've had a chance to tour the mill before Roseburg bought it. I know what they produce. It doesn't compete with stone. So Tracy doesn't have a concern there. I know one of the employees there and have heard what he has to say about Roseburg. I would do everything I could in much the same way that I did as mayor to recruit the Elk Foundation to come to Missoula to encourage that expansion.
I think we're postulating that it fits all the requirements and so forth, in which case it would be in the enviable position of not having to ask my opinion and never come to us, which is highly desirable on everybody's part. However, we find, however, often that whenever anything changes, which includes $25 million new developments, somebody's ox gets gored. And then in these cases, there's sometimes disagreement as to how important it is whose ox is getting gored. Sometimes depends on whose ox it is. But we do act often as arbiter in those cases. That's going beyond the question that you postulated. But if it comes that way, we do impose mitigating conditions and that sort of thing if it needs our approval. And I just, that wasn't part of the conditions that I'm asked to judge, so I can't say.
Thank you,
Did I say that it sounds like a great idea? I mean, yes. I'd love to have those jobs and added business. Maybe I forgot that part, but it's true.
Mike, you had your hand up.
Well, I guess we'll get more specific then. We see in the paper recently with the Safeway issue now, we're potentially going to be sued if we don't want to, if we want to pursue the Safeway issue. It sounds to me, and I know we have some that are on the council, which is great, and then I'd like other opinions, of course, but the minority in this case, which is the north side, and they've got a good group of neighbors that are trying to, I think, give some direction for Safeway, and a Safeway issue of business expansion that seems for the benefit of Missoula as a whole and the downtown as a whole, that it is a good thing, at least in my thought process. Where do we draw the line that the small majority becomes the ones that are vocal for, the small minority rather, that becomes vocal for the silent majority, it seems, in terms of benefits for Missoula and what happens. They don't have a grocery store downtown. I could see that developing into more problems than benefiting us as far as having Safeway go. The lawsuit against Playball Missoula was a problem. Really, that became an issue. It just dragged on. The inevitable was that they were doing the right thing, and hopefully that doesn't become a financial burden to the city. But Doesn't sound like Safeway's that way, but it seems like in our philosophies, we are not friendly to businesses when the vocal minority is really pummeling them. And so I guess I'd like your opinion on that, which would be not necessarily Safeway yes or no, but where do you draw the line in terms of representing all of Missoula, which the city council has to do, and realizing that this is the benefit of all of Missoula?
Good question. Jerry, put you on the spot first, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the hard question, Mike, because I have had to think about some of that. I was thinking about the play ball proposal when the university proposed it over in the university area, and some of the people that I represent were adamantly against that. How do you judge some of those issues? I guess the way I'm judging Safeway St. Pat's is the area that it's going into and the overall benefits. I've always envisioned Broadway as being a city street and a city thoroughfare. It always has been. So I'm having tremendously difficult under believing that that area belongs to one particular neighborhood, and they should control how it's developed. So I think you have to look very seriously at the overall impact of whether an area is specifically localized or whether it's an area that really benefits the town as a whole. And I come down that anything along West Broadway benefits the town as a whole. I'm having a real problem with the reconfiguration of Broadway because nobody wanted to listen to the businesses that were down there. We were listening to everybody else, but nobody really took the businesses seriously. So I come down, that's kind of how I look at it.
Thanks, Jerry. Alan?
Okay, let me clarify one thing, that the building that's there, what I've said is if the Safeway deal falls through, the whole process starts again, and I have a use for it, as other people do. So set that aside. The Safeway issue, this is over 3 years old. You know, the horse is out of the barn. And as far as I'm concerned, the public opinion and the dealing with it, you know, we're down to final negotiations with Safeway and St. Pat's. I firmly believe a grocery store is needed downtown in that area to support those people, because if you look, you know, a lot of those people, there's elderly homes near there, apartments, etc. A lot of the people walk there. And I think that the city council could sit down with Safeway and reach some compromise, whether it be in a smaller store, whether Safeway, and Safeway can do this, they've done it in other cities, takes the existing building, modifies that, uses that building. It's a very difficult issue, but the die has been cast 3 years ago. The public had opportunity to comment on it then. Yeah, times have changed, but also the conditions of this deal have changed too. Now we hear that St. Pat's, the urgency isn't there like it was 3 years ago. I think that we need to revisit this, but the horse is out of the barn.
I'll skip around a little bit. Rennie?
Oh, okay. As far as the Safeway thing, I think we need to look at it as previous people have said. Keeping the businesses in Missoula is, first of all, I think the primary thing. Whether or not the threats of closing or that they don't get their way, they'll leave or this or that, I think has to be looked at. As far as the neighborhood, what they want, the neighborhood plan and that, is it representative of the total amount of people living in that area? Or is it, as we've said before, the loud minority, the silent majority hasn't spoken? I think that's something that, as a council member, you have to look at and do some of your own feeling and investigation to see if this is the way the whole neighborhood feels. Is it the majority, the way they feel? As far as keeping the stores in Missoula, the big box stores or whatever you want to call them, before we got a lot of them stores, not just the Safeway, people used to always go to Spokane to do their shopping. We need to keep them box stores in Missoula so that the people in Missoula stay in Missoula and bring other people from the surrounding areas into Missoula for the business, and not going to bigger towns where they have them stores. So we have to look at all that, and hopefully that the agreement can come with Safeway, and they might have to give a little bit too, to come to an agreement that will be suitable to the people in the neighborhood for the best of our city.
Thank you, Randy. Tracy? Thanks. Before I forget what I was thinking. I think philosophical questions like that, of whether you represent your neighborhood or your ward or the larger city, benefit are that's part of probably every discussion. And I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. Obviously, I like to represent my neighborhood first. That's where I live. That's what I see when I look out the window in the morning. But the Safeway question to me, I guess if we talk about the development as being if it's an $8 million development, that's roughly $160,000 of new tax increment funding to MRA's second urban renewal district, which can fund and fuel some important redevelopment of both the river corridor along that area and the Broadway commercial district in that part of town. So it's an important project, and I think that area does need a grocery store. I'm not sure it needs to be a super Walmart type store. I'm not sure that a good Safeway project on the new site, oh, talk fast, 10 seconds. I'm sorry to see Safeway not willing to offer a compromise, a negotiated project that might incorporate the historic shops building on that site into a quality mixed-use residential project. Thank you.
Scott?
I am not a fan of minority victories or situations where the minority is given the opportunity to win. In other words, that a supermajority is required, as in this case. They bother me in principle, and what's more, I feel that victories run that way tend to be Pyrrhic victories, where you lose along with what you gain. The majority has the capacity to take revenge later on. It's just not a good situation. That is the situation that we're in this case. From a point of view of whether Safeway is a good idea, Safeway seems to me like just a fine idea. It could be a good contribution to that area. There are other fine ideas that might go there also, but Safeway is the one that's in front of us. In some regards, my best case scenario would be a kind of a compromise scenario in which Safeway functions actually to fulfill, not by its own nature, but by its presence, some of the goals that are spoken of in the North Side, West Side plan, which have to do with smaller scale development, smaller businesses and mixed uses. But really, I think my decision will be based on my notion of what will do the least harm. I fear that we're in a lose-lose situation, and I would like to do the least harm to planning in the city going forward. Whichever side wins, there will be a considerable blow to the prestige and power of planning in the city. If the neighborhood, we're in a situation where council has adopted the North Side, West Side plan. And it's our plan, it's not just the neighborhood plan. If we reject it, why will anyone plan with us anymore? On the other hand, if we affirm it, the majority will say it kept us from doing what's best for Missoula, so let's not plan anymore.
Thank you, Scott. Ed?
When we agreed to sell 2 blocks of property on Broadway and vacate a street and vacate part of another street, we weren't doing it to make a little boutique grocery store. We were doing it to make a Safeway. We did that before passage of the North Side, West Side plan. I admit I like the present proposal more than I like the original proposal. The present proposal includes space for some housing, which is fine. And I hope that the present proposal passes. And if the Safeway for some reason doesn't happen, I'll be very disappointed, because I think before long, all those folks will be driving to Walmart to shop.
Thank you. And Bob?
I think the Safeway proposal is a very attractive modification to that area. If you go down and look at it now, it's an eyesore. If that city shop was such a great building, why hasn't somebody come forward since it was vacated to offer some alternative uses for proposed redevelopment? Safeway is not going to be a big box store by any stretch of the imagination. I frequently use the new Safeway there at Reserve and Brooks, as well as the gas stations, and they work very hard to keep, one, their gas prices down, and two, the facility very attractive. And it's located right across the street from a residential area and within about 2 blocks of a school. So it really hasn't posed a problem for that segment of the community. They've been a very good neighbor. They do a lot of things to support the community. The jobs that they have pay better than average for that type of work, and they have good benefits for the employees. Whether or not it's a union store, I haven't been able to find out yet, but certainly merits support. And some other issues that haven't been looked at is what's going to happen. I mean, we've got some people who are willing to deal with the underground gas storage tanks that were there with the shop, and that could be a significant liability for the city at some point in time if someone doesn't accept that responsibility. If this isn't approved, Safeway's going to go away, and then what is that going to do to the people who need to get groceries somewhere else? You know, we heard all this talk about bikes, and certainly it wouldn't make grocery shopping bike accessible.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions?
Oh, come on, I can ask another one.
Bob?
I'm going to kind of expand a little bit on what Mike just asked and ask you to be more specific. And what I'm asking is, as a city council member, when there's a clear conflict between what you believe is best for the city and what you receive as feedback and input from your ward, which do you see to be your first obligation, to do what's right for the city or to respond to the issues that come from your ward? And Tracy talked a little bit about that. Most of the rest of you didn't. You know, to me, it's a basic identification of how you see your role, who you represent, folks that live around you and in the city, as far as the responsibility of a city council person.
Okay. Tracy, I'm going to start with you.
I go back to that as a philosophical question, and I think it's a good question, because we start out being voted in the setup we have in Missoula as representatives from a particular part of town. And so I think we have, a representative has a great deal of responsibility to those constituents. They expect or hope to have a voice downtown, protecting them. So first, you might say that's your primary responsibility. However, there is the larger good of the community. This discussion probably goes back as long as we've been formulating government beyond the tribal level. And I'm not sure it's that clear-cut ever. I'm not sure everyone's always going to be in agreement as to what exactly, if city interest is an obvious outcome of one particular decision. We're always going to be discussing that. There'll be contentious issues that, we'd be lucky if we could always say, this is a great benefit to the entire city, it's obvious, and so anybody that disagrees is wrong. I don't think you can have that kind of a definition of very many issues, things. My time's up. Waffling on, right? Gary?
Thanks for the question, Bob, and I guess, I think it comes down to the individual and how the individual perceives and analyzes issues. My first commitment really is to my neighborhood and my ward that elect me. But I also know the people that make up that ward, and the people that make up that ward are business people that operate throughout the community. So while I've got an obligation to pay attention to local neighborhood issues and how it's surrounding your home, and I associate with those, I also listen to the people that live in my ward that work other places and have an interest around there. So when it comes down to those issues, I've got to make a personal decision as to how I think an issue should go. That's why we elect representatives. If the majority of the people in my ward don't think that I'm representing them, then they have the choice to vote me out. But for those issues, I have to vote my conscience based upon my discussions with the various peoples in the ward, and trying to get a feel for them as to what their most important issue is. And I know right now in Ward 4, at least the people down in the flats, not necessarily the people in the hills, because they have different things. And the neighborhood growth issue, infill development, and PMCs are a very important local concern for the immediate neighborhood. But I've also heard them talk about supporting an issue like St. Pat's and creating and keeping good jobs in Missoula.
Alan?
Good questions. The people in Ward 4 are the ones that will vote me in. And fundamentally, my interest is for them. I want to do what they want and the right thing for Missoula. The issues facing the city, they're citywide, and they're not necessarily specific to Ward 4. Okay, now that's a separate issue. But I would always want to do what my constituents want me to do. And it's not listening to the minority, it's the majority of the people. And canvassing them and keep appraised of what they're feeling. I'm finding out some very interesting things with the Ward 4 people right now. But my first loyalty, I want to do what's the best for the city as a whole, but I also want to do what the people that elected me to the office, what they want. In the unlikely event that there's something that the people in Ward 4 want, if a hypothetical event comes up, and I'm directly, violently opposed to it, but if the majority of the people want it this way, that's what I'm going to do. That's why they elected me. It's not what I want, it's what the people want.
Scott?
Well, in my experience, it's never completely unambiguous what's best for the city or what the ward wants. You're always getting different pieces in all regards, and your own judgment tends to be mixed. You go for the best you can. And then it remains a kind of a balancing act between your interest in the city as a whole or your own ward. There are some factors, I think, that raise the importance of the ward voice to me, which has to do with, for example, what is their direct interest in the question and what is their information about the question. Often information is not as widespread as you would wish in a case like this. One of the reasons people come down to represent is that when you spend some time down there, you learn a lot about how things are working, and you often, in a given case, know considerably more elements of an issue than the constituent who's speaking to you. And particularly in cases where there may be a difference between my view of what's good for the city and what a constituent is saying to me, it becomes extremely important that I should do my best to convey any elements like that are not available to the constituent. That's an important role to play, perhaps as important as how the vote goes in the final case in many cases.
Thank you, Scott. Bob?
A lot of what Scott says makes a lot of sense. Having served 4 years at City Hall, the issue with regard to knowledge is a significant one. Unfortunately, the average citizen doesn't have the interest or the availability of information with regard to many issues that elected officials make decisions on. So it's our responsibility, as he said, to convey that information to the best of our ability. But no issue is going to be 100% zero with regard to a ward or city. And I would solicit opinions that were not coming in to me voluntarily, as well as those that were, to try and hear, as Mike talks about, the silent majority, the ones who don't take, because it's not important enough for them to pick up the phone and ring your bell, so to speak. But there are some issues that sometimes are NIMBY issues that are in the overall public interest. And I can relate to some of those, having dealt with them as mayor, and that was sewer extension and annexation. And I became enlightened on that, and it became clear that the decisions had community interest that was greater than individual ward interests, and we are all in it together.
Thanks, Bob. Rennie?
That kind of reminds me a little bit like when I used to referee high school football and basketball. If you can satisfy 50% of the people, you're doing a good job. This is a little bit more serious. I think I would look at it this way. I was voted to represent the people of my ward, and their wishes are what I should be concerned about. If their wishes and ideas are different than mine, and I think that maybe mine is better for the city, then it's up to me to convince the people of my ward over to my side so that I can vote what the majority wants. If I can't do that, then I guess maybe I'm wrong and maybe they're right, and then I better look at their position and vote the way they want me to vote.
Thank you. Ed?
I think I'll find out what the majority wants here in a couple of months. It's real hard to know what everybody in your ward wants, because they're not all going to talk to you. A few people will talk to you, people who are particularly interested in it, or people who are directly affected by it will talk to you. Beyond that, you talk to your friends, your neighbors, the people you run across, and their opinions influence how you deal with an issue. Right? The best way I've found to deal with that kind of stuff is to deal with it internally, which is what do I think is the best thing to do, and that's finally how all decisions are made. I think Bob took away my sewer and annexation issues, that's all right, I've got more. But those are great. I mean, we had a sewer issue in Ward 6 before I was elected, and there was a big sewer project, and there were a lot of people who didn't have much money who were required to pay for the sewer. I don't think they wanted that to happen, and it happened anyway. Up to Rattlesnake, since I've been here, that's not in my ward. The issue was the same thing. The people there didn't want it. Now they're suing. They need the sewer because it's part of the community as a whole. But my time being up, I will tell you about sidewalks in parks. If you go to Boyd or McLeod Park and look at the nice curvy sidewalks, those are there because some of the people in the ward wanted them. They're an allocation of city funds to a specific ward, and they're real nice. I like them.
Thank you. Ron?
I have a question for all of you. In terms of new construction and remodeling, could you tell us whether you feel the present permit system in terms of building permits, city zoning compliance, the fire regs, do you think they're too restrictive in terms of growth and development? Do you think there's problems there? And if so, what would you do to cure them?
Start with you, Ed, this time.
Well, what do you mean restrictive? I mean, if building permits say you need to build it this way so it doesn't burn or fall down or drown, so that's a good idea. You've adopted codes that are state and national codes. I'm fully in favor of those. I'm in favor of having somebody enforce building permits outside the city limits. I think that would be nice. I don't care who does it, but I think it's an important thing for housing. Zoning was the other part of your question, I think?
Correct.
zoning is real hard because some portions of it are being largely ignored today, and that's a land area requirement. And that has to do with pre-existing non-conforming lots. And we go through this argument for 2 hours every Tuesday, so I won't try to give it all to you, but I don't see zoning as being overly restrictive. I think it's a reflection of what the people in an area hopefully want, and I'm in favor of it the way it is.
Thanks, Ed. Rennie?
Of course, we need codes to protect the people and the developments that are there now. For the safety of the city and the neighborhood, the codes need to be enforced. As far as zoning, I think it needs to be looked at. The zoning regulations and that ordinances should be so that everybody understands them, which they don't now. Areas are zoned certain ways, and people don't know that certain things can be done until the bulldozer moves into their lot next to them and starts building, and then find out, yeah, they can do that there. So it needs to be looked at.
Thank you. Bob?
The building codes and fire codes are handed down from the federal level, adopted at the state, and then adopted at the local level. They cannot be mitigated in any way. They can only be increased by the local government if you're going to enforce them. I heard, when I was in Stevensville, I heard horror stories of structures that were built without building code enforcement, and it made a real believer by me of their implementation. As far as zoning goes, the growth management policy that we have implemented, I think, has opened a lot of loopholes in our present zoning situation, and has created situations like Rennie talked about, where, surprise, here come the bulldozers. And I think that's something that needs some modification.
Thank you. Scott?
I agree entirely with what Bob said about the building code regulation. To address zoning in particular, it seems to me that our zoning primarily was set up with the notion of separation and creating little monocultures. The most extreme one is residential monocultures, where nothing shall impinge on a residential area of single-family homes. I think given where our transportation situation has come to now, I have at least a different vision of the city that I think very gradually the city will need to shift to respond to the changes that have taken place in urban living. And that's where you work with nodes of commercial and job development, which are what you might call destination nodes. If you think of the home as the starting place, these are the destination nodes, and they're scattered around. And they have usually high concentration in the center, and become less dense as you move out, and they shorten the travel times that are necessary. To do that, some modification in our zoning, our present zoning prevents that in certain degrees.
Thank you, Scott. Alan?
Okay, the codes, I think that, I agree with what they've been saying on that. The zoning issues, as far as I'm concerned, when they change this, Missoula doesn't have any zoning traditionally anymore. I've sat in on a number of the zoning subcommittee meetings, and one of the meetings, the group, they've got some tough work ahead of them. They couldn't even decide what density bonus means. So that tells me, hey, we've got some serious problems. I think the neighborhood clusters, all that, we need to simplify the approach. We also need to look and see what other cities are doing and how they're managing this. So we've got a problem, as far as I'm concerned, and we need to look at it and revise how we're going about solving it.
Jerry?
I'm going to take a little bit different approach on the national codes, at least. I understand there's nothing we can do with them, but I also know a little bit about how they're formulated and adopted, and they're really adopted by the big city approach to the problem areas, and we end up living with the big city solutions to to building code problems. So I personally think that the building codes are maybe a little over restrictive, but since they're adopted by national and state, there isn't a whole lot that we can do about them locally. Other than making sure that when there are issues that comes up, we have some way of administering them locally and making some modifications for extenuating circumstances. On a simple issue, zoning codes I think are overly restrictive. Most of them have been adopted by committee process, and I'm becoming a believer. I don't totally agree in the committee process because you end up with a bunch of compromises, and the compromises don't always solve all of the problems, so we have some of them. One of them is hillside standards. We need to relook at that. Fees, I believe there was some need to adjust fees. However, I think the thing that's really driving fees is the need for more money for the city to increase its budget, and I think we've gone overboard.
Thanks, Jerry. Tracy? See if I can add anything new at the end of the line here. And I was going to agree with everybody who's spoken already about codes protecting people, but I think Jerry's point might be well taken, and I'm not as familiar with it as he might be being an architect. Fees, I think that raising them to cover at least increased costs due to inflation pressure, upward spiraling, might be appropriate, and perhaps some larger projects might pay proportionally more than small individual projects for their fees. I've sat in the engineer's office and gotten an hour and a half, 2 hours of professional time for my little remodeling projects. I think that's a bargain. That's a deal. Zoning, I think we should return to our 70 years of zoning that we had, that most people lived under and found out what projects they could and couldn't do, and have found that they suddenly didn't benefit from some of the lot divisions that they could have done now that we know they could do. I think that stable and predictable neighborhoods help with affordability and help with keeping families and age diversity in our neighborhoods. I think the piecemeal abrogation of zoning with density bonuses and PNCs is unfair to neighbors, I think, and it reminds me of people who drive on our highways and our city streets who don't want to pay any taxes, but they want the benefits. I think those new concepts for zoning are effectively throwing zoning out. Thank you.
Okay. Steve?
Maybe an easy question to answer here, but as a business person, I haven't had the luxury of being able to raise prices for years. Yet I've still had to, every single year, increase my level of customer service. And I've done it with fewer people. Why shouldn't that model be appropriate for the city?
I'm going to start in the middle. Scott.
Partly because it's a great thing to shoot for. Part of the factor that differs, it seems to me, is that the city is, they'll probably tell me it's not a difference, we need to talk back and forth, but the city is growing and changing in significant ways that in some regards require more service from the city, from the government. We are learning a lot more about, we are becoming a city. We're in the transition from a large town to a city. And we're learning a lot of the factors and elements that will control the quality of our life here thereafter, and they're putting new needs on us in some regards. Look at open space as one of those, that as the open space was seen to be disappearing, something had to be done about it, whereas nothing had to be done about it before. Thanks.
Bob?
I think it is a concept that does need to be applied at City Hall. I think I can point to 4 years of experience of having done that when I was mayor. And I think we were successful in what we did. It entailed some very serious consequences, one of which was freezing wages for 1 year. When I was there, it wasn't a popular thing to do. But City Hall is still there, and so are most of the employees that lived through it. You do that every year as you face increasing costs from providing benefits for your employees, increasing taxes, and materials cost increases as well in many instances. So that mentality needs to be in place at City Hall, and unfortunately, it's not there right now.
Rennie?
I think like any business, you have to analyze continually as to what you're getting for your dollar. To operate efficiently and to provide the services sometimes conflict with one another, because to offer the better services and takes more people sometimes and more money. But it's something that has to be continually done. And if your demand for a product or what is going down, of course, then you have to analyze how can I produce a product cheaper, or I don't know what kind of business you're in. But it's something that would apply to the City Hall too, because the City Hall, Missoula, is a business. And so it should be looked at all the time to make sure they're getting the most out of the tax money dollar that the people are giving without having to raise the taxes.
Thank you. Ed?
So your question is, why should your employees have to increase productivity and city employees not have to increase productivity? And I think the answer is they both do. The city does a thing called zero-based budgeting, which is the closest it comes to trying to match the budgeted expenditures with the services that are provided. It's not an easy thing to come up with. As you know, we have some employees who, in my opinion, do the work of two people. We have some people whose work product is difficult for me to determine, and there's 300 odd city employees. I think your question may be better put toward the administration part of the city. We're the legislative and funding part. If that helps.
Thanks, Ed. Tracy?
Thanks. I hope I didn't misunderstand your question. What I heard, you can tell me I got this wrong, that you were suggesting that it's always possible to increase service and decrease under decreased revenue circumstances? Is that not what you said?
Put under significant market pressure, exactly.
I think at times, and I have to say that in times of such growth as we have in Missoula, I don't see how we can't have some increase in the size of government. It would be nice if we were 25 unit groups, all supporting each other and working together. We're a long way away from that, and I don't want to get off too far philosophically. Times are challenging, they're not static right now. Inflation drives some of the increases. I think one thing we might look at is to decide which services are necessarily provided by government and which might be provided privately as a start.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, to me, it comes down to the political and personal concepts and will as to what you want to do. I've been in your circumstances and trying to run a small business, and medical insurance for years is going up 15 and 20% every year. I always had to ask my employees, we got a choice here. I can't raise my fees because of my competitors, but if you want the medical insurance, the extra cost of medical insurance is going to be applied to your part of your wage increase, and I've had to do that for years. It wasn't something I like to do. For some reason, City Hall takes a totally different look at it. And part of that drive becomes from the people that sit on the city council that actually set city policy. We don't administer, but we certainly set city policy. I think I've been frustrated for years that city council people adding little projects to increase budgets. And I know this year I dropped a project that I liked for renovating one of the Southside Lions restroom areas because I didn't want to increase city taxes. And I've heard one council lady tells me, well, our constituents want more services, so we've got to provide more services. And that comes down to the political question and what your personal philosophy is.
Thank you, Jerry. And Alan?
I think it's time for the city to start running lean and mean. I looked through the budget and sat in on some of the budget meetings. There's a lot of fat, a lot of places in the budget that we could tighten the belt. Computers, for example, we're spending $114,000 to upgrade computers. I say, no, wait, what we have now is working. I don't know if anybody went to Gardner's auction the other night, where they auctioned off old city computers for $25 a piece. And people were just snapping them up. Laptops. Why do we need new laptops? So there's areas that we can trim, areas we can run lean and adjust for the times. Some of the sales of public property, I think we could get some better competitive bids. The city shops is a prime example. We didn't go out and bid that. A couple of people did come forward wanting to do, and Safeway and St. Pat's won. But there's more money to be made. And I think that's what the type of thing we need to look at.
Well, our time's up. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude and the Chamber's gratitude for you for being here, first of all. Number two, for having the courage and the willpower to run. We truly appreciate that. It's a huge undertaking, not only the campaign, but if you should win, the ability to serve. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for attending, and good luck to all of you.